Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today I'm going to be doing something very different. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial series on building little custom buildings and accessories for your various Godzilla figures and other kaiju figures, especially aimed at something like the MonsterArts line, where we get these very few pre-manufactured buildings that scale up with them, and the ones that we do get are extraordinarily expensive. And there's not very much material online about how to make your own sort of ones, and there are a very small handful of good videos out there. So I thought I'd put in some of my ideas here. So in this episode, this is going to be just a little series where I'm not sure how many episodes I'll have in it or anything like that at the moment yet. I've got a couple of ideas of things we can do, but just for this first episode, I'm going to be showing off the range of stuff that I've put together, hopefully give you guys some inspiration and ideas, and giving you just the most basic tutorial of the simplest building, and giving you a couple of little ideas of what you can do here or there. In the future episodes, I'll show you guys how to make damaged buildings and stuff like that, as well as display bases and all sorts of other cool little things you can add. And of course, you can mix and match these things and add in some explosion effects and whatever else you have and create really cool displays. So without further ado, I'll just show you guys some little bits and stuff that I have made. So I'll throw in a little slideshow right here of some various displays I've put together with the different buildings that I've been able to make. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Alright, so as you can see, there's a wide variety of buildings and display bases that you can put together, and some of it, if I do say so myself, does look pretty good. So I'm just going to take you through, before we actually start the tutorial, I'm just going to show you some of my favorite buildings and some of the effect pieces just on their own to begin with. So first, I'll start off with some display bases. So we'll be doing these in a future video, but as you can see, this is just a very simple blank one with roads going through it and some pre-existing destruction and rubble, destroyed building right there. So bases like these are very, this one's nice and compact, and it offers a lot of, not having the buildings fixed to it, offers a lot of display options. So you can have your Godzilla, even just on its own, on something like this, you can have like the little tanks that you get with, what do you call them? Like the effect sets for MonsterArts and stuff like that. So a great display option for these things, but you can even just have the buildings on their own without one of these, but this is just another cool little touch. And of course, I haven't made many of these, but I've made a couple, and like this one, there's a lot of great tutorials out there about how to make natural scenery. Most of it is in a completely different scale, unfortunately, but if you do a little experimenting, you can get it to look pretty good and pretty convincing next to your Godzilla. And I've got a lot of really cool tips and tricks about how to make natural scenery too, and how to make it make this stuff from stuff that is very easy to get and looks very convincing. So apart from this tree, all this shrubbery and the textures here are they're very easy to make, and I highly recommend trying some stuff like that out. So I'll do that in a future episode. But what we're going to be doing in this episode, is some simple buildings. So here are some of my favorite buildings that I've put together. I'll show you a close-up of these in a sec. We've got a nice destroyed building. This is one of my very favorite ones, and I'm gonna do a tutorial on a destroyed building in probably the next episode or the one after in this series. Also, you can have little cool display things like this, which are some palm trees, just to mix and match in your city displays. And you can have, big skyscrapers. And one thing that I'm going to be talking about quite a bit in this episode is just adding little details. Like you see these overhangs here. Hopefully I can put that in focus. So you can really see the detail here in this building that I've made. You can see it's got all these advertising panels right up here. And that I find it adds a lot of character to these buildings. And now you may have noticed that these are printed on covers. So this one is this is sort of the basic model of building that we'll be doing in this episode, where you can make these on various materials. I find that the ones I like the most are made on wood blocks. If you can get a nice solid block of wood to stick the textures on, they're the most convincing, I find. But this one's just made of a tuna, a box that held a tuna can, like one of those oval shaped ones. So this is a very good size for a building to go with a Godzilla figure, and you can change up the printing textures and the designs to match the scales that you want. But I will provide in the video description, I'll have links to various textures that I've made for these sort of things, and I'll show you those off to you in a sec, because I have a whole bunch here that I'll go through. But one of the things I really like about this building, a little detail that I've added, is it has this cool little billboard here with some sort of Japanese advert, and I'll provide pictures and stuff that you can use to cut these out to add to your buildings, because little details like this and these adverts here, as well as the storefronts down here, really add to the character of your displays. And that's why this is one of my all-time favorite buildings. And again, this one's not entirely finished. As you can see, this was made on a cracker box, so like water crackers, like one of those rectangular boxes, and it scales up nicely with this guy. And another box that was very similar, I made this building, which is again a very simple design with the storefronts and the ads around the side, and some advertising around the top, as well as some details on the top of the roof. And I'll show you how to make these really easily, and they're really effective next to your kaiju figures. Because like I said, unfortunately there's a lot of building tutorials for miniature houses and stuff, but they're all in like N scale, HO scale. I don't know which ones are which or anything, but basically they're for model trains. And the problem there is for Godzilla figures that scale up well with those sort of model trains and stuff like that, you need the smallest scale of model trains, and they're sort of buildings that correspond with those, and you'd need a very huge scale Godzilla, so something like an X plus here, so 30 centimeters X plus. You can see big difference between this and this, and this is where you start to get stuff that you can put in scale with in most of the commercial stuff they sell, but expensive as well, especially if you want to do a fairly decent display. And a lot of us collect MonsterArts figures because they are absolutely fantastic figures, and we want to display them the best we can. And I back a couple of months ago, I did actually maybe like a year ago, I had a big time where I was searching and searching for ideas and stuff, and that's where, and looking at all the various videos from like the train models, as well as seeing if there were any ones specifically for kaiju displays, which there were almost none back then, and that's where I learned a lot of this stuff. So I just adapted it to making these models, and I figured that there was a serious lack in these sort of videos, so that's what we're doing today. So like I said, this one's one of my favorite buildings as well. I put some work into giving it a nice shape for the base here. And yeah, I still should finish this one because it has this strip across here that's not painted or covered. So I usually hide that in photos, but then I have this really cool entrance area down here which doesn't really get shown that much. And yeah, so those are some of my favorite sort of completed buildings. You can also do very small buildings. Basically, the something that's going to be recurring today in the themes that I'm going to be presenting is the more small details you can add, the more character and the cooler your city will be. So especially with stuff like rooftops, you can do really great things with doing various rooftops, and the more intricate shapes you can put on them, the more convincing your buildings will be. So especially with like the big skyscrapers, because they're very simple shapes for most of them, just straight tall bits. The intricacies come at the very top and the very bottom, so you can add little bits like lines and stuff, ruling them off, and like little bunkers at the top with like the entrance and pillars to act like the lightning rods and all sorts of stuff like that. Little squares that could in theory be some sort of generators, or they could be like you know, the big fans they have at the top of buildings and stuff like that. So I find that for just the windows and stuff like that, you can have very flat surfaces, just the printed label, they look good, but when you start adding on 3D elements mixed with that, that's when you get the best effect for a building. So yeah, let's talk about the photos, the stuff you can print out to add to your building. So I'm just gonna move some of these off my work area here, so I can start showing you some of these prints. And yeah, again, like we'll get to the destroyed buildings, but the same applies with the destroyed buildings. Like the more damage you can the more intricacy you can add to the damage, the better. One important tip about damage, like I'll get into this more in a later video, and I don't want to like go into it too much today because it's not the focus of today's video, but if you're only going to watch one video in this series, then it will probably be this one, so I can just get as much info to you as I can without overdoing it. But an important thing with like the damage in buildings is you don't want to have a building, for example, and just like put little bits of damage all over the whole surface. What you really want to look for is if you want to make a building, I mean, you can do it all over the whole surface. Like if you look at this thing, which I mean, it doesn't look like much here, but if you have it, like if you saw on some of the photos in the intro, when it's lying on its side under like a kaiju or something, it kind of looks like a burnt out, completely destroyed building. And I'll get into making these later on. It really depends on what you have on hand with these, but something to see in a future episode. But with damage, you want it to be like specifically on one side, and when there's a damage, you want it, a tip is to imagine how it happened and what the building would look like if something specific happened to it. So with this one, the aim of it kind of was that something came along the top. It may have come through here, or it may have been two separate sort of collisions. But, you know, in a monster battle, someone could have kicked in here, or punched into this, or stepped into that. And it doesn't, like, the whole building isn't destroyed. Like, the back is perfectly fine here, and you can almost use that as a non-destroyed building from certain angles in photos, too, which is pretty cool. But this area, it has a lot of that damage, and you can kind of see the damage flowing through in one direction. And you don't have to do that in one direction, but just as long as you know, kind of have like in your head a backstory of how it happened. Another tip is to put in depth. So what I like to do is I like to add the flooring in here to see the different levels in the building. And it does take time to do this stuff, but I find it's very worth it. And to have this also be able to see where the rubble falls, because when you destroy something, the rubble is going to fall somewhere. So it's important to have lots of little rubble bits that you can put around the place that match up nicely with the particular buildings that you have. And that's why this one has this rubble sitting here underneath it, and that's why this is one of my favorite buildings. And you'll have the I'll show you how to make one. I might even do this exact one in a future video for you guys, because I actually have the photos. The what do you call it? You'll see the texturing for that particular building. So we'll just move Godzilla out of the way here. And here is my collection of the printed out photos. So I'm actually just gonna change the camera angle for you guys, so while I'm talking about this you can have a better idea of what I'm showing you. Alright, so here's my collection of printed textures. So you can see I've already cut out a lot of these in making my various buildings, and you can probably recognize a lot of these textures. So I'm just going to kind of give you a brief look at all of these. And while I'm doing that, so you can, very useful textures, and you can just picture all of these in a cityscape, and I'll have links to where you can get these, because I actually made these, and I made them to the specific scale that they are. I forgot what the program's called, but I'll explain how I did that in a bit. But basically, you can get these on there's a Facebook group which I run called Custom and Budget Figure Dioramas and Effect Parts, or something like that. I'll have it written on the screen now. And I'll have a link to that in the description, of course. And I highly, if you're into this stuff, definitely join that group. There's some very helpful people with lots of ideas, posting pretty regularly, a great community of people making these various dioramas. And so you can see all these little bits. And basically the way I made these was I went into a program similar to Photoshop, and I just Googled up building textures, basically, and I found ones that tessellate and match up perfectly, and then I just put them together, because these were all little squares. This wasn't like a big building texture, it was like just a tiny little square, something like that, and then I layered them, and once I had one made, I got another texture in that program and layered it on top of that one to make sure the windows were about the same size and the scaling was about right. And that's how I kept it consistent. And then I made dozens of these things. It took quite a while, but it was very worth it. And now I have a big library of these things for you guys, so you can use all these textures. And I actually printed these at what's it called? I forgot. Officeworks, that's the one. So in Australia we have a brand called Officeworks, and you can go there and you can print these in glossy fancy prints, because these aren't, I didn't design them for A4 size sheets of paper, by the way. These are about half the size of an A4 sheet of paper. So if you put two of these together, that is an A4 sheet of paper. So these are half that size. these prints are actually I cut this print, so that doesn't count, but okay, this is a full one. So that's an A4 sheet of paper, so these are halves, and these prints measure 6 by 8 inches, I think. Yeah. So that's how big these are. I'll just check how much that is in centimeters for you guys. So these ones are 15.2 centimeters by 20.3 centimeters. 15.2 by 20.3, or 6 by 8 inches, and that's the scaling I used. I think when I printed these, it cropped the images that I actually made just a tiny bit, but you know, but basically whatever printer you use these on, it'll keep it consistent when you download these images. If you guys have any more suggestions on what websites or places I should put all these images for you guys, and here we get some cool bits, some roads. But if you don't have a Facebook account, or the link doesn't work for you guys, then you know, let me know, because I might be able to put these images on some other place on the internet for you guys. Maybe I could do DeviantArt or something like that. But you know, you got all of these, and here we get some cool stuff. So this one's very cut out, but I made an entire page of just advertising. Because if you look at any photos of Tokyo, especially the CBD, the main districts there, you see that it basically just looks like this on the buildings. So you can be really creative and cut out these bits and just the big clusters of these ads. So these are all, you know, Japanese ads. You can see there's these big clusters of ads here, and you can just cut strips of these, and that, my friends, is what I use to make these. And you can see what the ads look like up close, but from a distance they look really good, really convincing as this overhang of ads above the shops. And the same with the shop windows, actually. I made a whole page, or at least a majority of a page with various shop windows. So I'll just go back through here and look for that for you guys. These prints, they do cost more. Here we go. So these are all shop fronts that I made, and again, these will be available for you guys to just to download. So you basically just click on the picture, and you can either click the download button, or you can right click on it and click save image as, and then you have it basically, and then you can print it to your heart's content. So you can get all these shop fronts, you cut them out. You got all these things with more advertising, you can cut those out and stick them as billboards and do all sorts of cool stuff. There's lots of potential for these cutouts. And yeah, so this is what we're going to be working with today. And before we get to building our building, I'll just show you some of the tools and other stuff that you will need, apart from this stuff. So obviously something like scissors. I recommend some scalpel knives. They're very handy. So I have a little set here. These are, you know, you can get these anywhere. They're very cheap, and they're pretty effective, especially if you have multiple blades, because with a fresh blade these are a lot better. And the other thing you're going to need is some cardboard boxes or wooden blocks, or some people use foam. I've seen in other videos. I find you can use foam, but I prefer, like I made this one on styrofoam, which is a lot trickier because you can't use a lot of glues on it because it will melt it. So I used hot glue, and it was I find hot glue very tedious to work with, very tricky. But as you can see here, but it can be done. But yeah, so in saying that, you do need glue. So I've just got a couple of glues. I like to use this sort of tacky glue. The only thing is, like, some of these can, because the glues have solvents, some of them, make sure that you don't put it on certain plastics, and certain, like, polystyrene will melt with certain glues like these. But what's this? I've got Tarzan's grip and some other, like, generics, cement glue. You could also use super glue, I guess. I like tacky glues. I find super glue very messy sometimes. And yeah, stuff like small boxes, wooden blocks. Like, this is a tiny little cardboard box from some Vietnamese candy of some kind. These little block offcuts are really good. The triangular ones are a little bit harder to use, but you could make a triangular building. I don't see why not. And these ones are kind of hard to find, but I'm sure there are places that you can find these. You just have to look around in your particular town. There's and when people throw stuff away and at building sites, you can find them. Here in Brisbane, we have a shop near Park Road that's called Reverse Garbage, and they have they literally just sell cool stuff that they're like a charity type warehouse, small warehouse that sells random stuff that people throw away in the garbage, and then they sell it really cheap, so you can stock up on little offcuts of wood, and they just have lots of weird industrial offcuts and stuff as well, amongst other random stuff. So that's where I got some of those blocks, and, you know, like toy blocks and things like that. And you really have to be creative and just look at stuff and picture it as buildings. I also found in the process of making buildings, I really started looking at cities more, because I live in Brisbane, Australia, so I really started to pay attention to architecture more, and you really learn just by observing more than anything. So look at photos, don't and get ideas. You don't have to make it exactly to a photo, but you start getting the idea of how architecture works. So with that said, I'm gonna clear our space, and we're gonna decide what we're gonna do in this episode. So I'm thinking I'll probably just to keep it really simple, I'll use this wooden block, and if I have time, because it is getting dark outside and I do film these in natural light, I don't know if I'm going to be able to build a whole building in time. But if we have time, I will do a one in cardboard, but that might be for another episode. Something else, some other things that you might like to have is, you know, smaller blocks, smaller bits and bobs. What you will need, actually, I forgot to mention, what will really help you is stuff like flat cardboard. So I got this nice sturdy cardboard. I got some very thin cardboard. You can get these off, like, you can also use cardboard from, like, just like cracker boxes and stuff like that you open up and cut up to make little details and structural things as well. Stuff that you can use is foam board. There's a lot of tutorials about how to use that stuff, but you need a really sharp scalpel knife to deal with that. And like this detail under here, I made out of foam board. If it focuses, so you can see it's just like paper, and then like a sort of foam in between, and then another layer of paper. And this is often used in model making. So you can do some really cool stuff with that, like these little textural bits and all things you can add. Like, this is a layer of foam board down here, and this is a layer of cardboard coming down here, and this was also cardboard, I think, or foam board, and that had the picture mounted on and painted. Paint obviously will be a really good thing that you can add, and all sorts of other stuff. Well, in the future videos, while making the landscapes and stuff, there'll be a lot of really crazy sounding stuff that will actually help you out a lot. Toothpicks. You can buy these at craft stores. You can get a whole bag of these, and these are really good for detailing, like For example, sorry, this video is a little bit chaotic. Ah, here we go. So you can use toothpicks. They do this does take time in measuring, but like this building, you can see that overhang is made of toothpicks that I've just glued on. Obviously PVA glue I would recommend. You can get gap filler. I got a whole tube of it, acrylic gap filler, and it's like this white paste. I've actually poured mine into a salsa jar, but this isn't going to be relevant in this video, but you could probably use it depending on what you're doing and just for ideas. But it's this white paste, and this is literally just to fill up gaps in walls, and it's you can get a tube. If you get the cheapest one, it can be very cheap, like I don't know, $2 or $3 for like this amount, and this literally just dries as like a hard textured substance, so and it'll fill up gaps and stuff, and it's really cool for making textures with destruction and natural textures like the ground and little rock formations and all sorts of stuff, as well as rubble in destruction. It's very helpful. It's what I used for a lot of the stuff on this base here. Use that, and bits of cork as well for destruction, and coffee grounds. It will be in my little secret coming up in a future episode. So yeah, but now let's choose our building texture. So we're gonna make it out of a wooden block, so I'm thinking could just be like a little complex little mini skyscraper. Could be this way, could be this way. Don't know what I'll do today. Maybe I'll just have it up this way for now. And the first thing I like to do is, and I guess you don't really have to do this, because you could just use the wood texture on top and paint that, and that could be the top of your building. But what I like to do, and you don't have to do this, but I find it is really effective, is if you... Oh, another thing I will mention is you should get a pencil to mark stuff out. I actually forgot. Okay, so I got my pencil that I was talking about, and another thing you could use is just whatever generic container for paint, and some paints and a brush and water container eventually. So I just got that stuff while I was at it. Because we're gonna be painting this little square. You could also keep it white or whatever color the cardboard is. That looks alright on some buildings, but I like to color the tops of my buildings gray. Although a lot of mine I was lazy and made them white, and I kind of regret that. But you know, making them different colors also helps diversify your city. You don't want all your buildings to be the same color. That's why I made so much of those textures. But anyway, what I'm doing now is I'm just drawing a line just to across this this block on this cardboard. So now we have a little shape here. Actually, since I actually forget that one, I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna use this brown piece of cardboard, since this one's already pretty cut up and that one's still a nice big square. You know, make the most of the materials you've got. But you get the idea. You make this square or rectangle to cover the top of your building, because it's a lot easier and it looks a lot better when you have a cardboard pattern that's then painted as the top of your building, as opposed to a wood grain that's been painted. Or you could try and paint a cardboard box, but the problem is most of them are very glossy. Also, the cardboard the small ones are made out of is very soft, so you'd have to make sure it doesn't tilt up. So I use a slightly thicker cardboard for that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my scalpel knives. Get a nice sharp scalpel knife and a ruler. And this might take a couple of passes. and you just cut it out. Luckily this knife's pretty good, so this is really easy. You'd also probably be better off with a metal ruler for this, but I've been using a plastic ruler with no real issues, so I'm sure you'll be fine with one like that as well. So again, you can make this as exact or as loose as you like, and it's basically just up to you, and you'll see the difference in your buildings. You could go really crazy with what kind of shapes and structures you build out of cardboard to decorate your buildings, obviously. But this is sort of the level that I'm comfortable with, because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want it to look better than a lot of the dioramas I see being made. Obviously make sure you have a surface you don't mind being cut or damaged under this when you do this sort of stuff. Like you could put another, like a wood block or another piece of cardboard under this just to help if you wanted to protect a good table or something, or a actual cutting board. It would be highly recommended, and I've got one somewhere but not near me right now. So what we're going to do is, once we have our cardboard, we get our building and we choose the top of it. Just see if there's one side that fits better. I think this side. So yeah, I'm just going to show you up close right now, if it ever focuses. So there's that wood texture that if we paint it over, you're not really going to lose it unless we have a thick layer of paint, and that's just not going to look too good. So what we do is we get a bit of cardboard, put that over there. Come on, focus camera, focus. Everyone else here is focusing except for you. But you get the point. So you get the cardboard, and then we just glue that on the top. That's the first thing I recommend doing. So I'm just using this kind of glue. Just looks like that. It's a bit yellowy. You could, spread it out with a little stick if you like, just to make sure it's glued down well. And like I said, I like using wooden blocks because they're easier to work with, one thing, because you have to kind of stabilize cardboard boxes, because they tend to look kind of like floppy a bit, the way because they're made on soft cardboard. So I tend to try and glue down the flaps and even weight them. Like sometimes I put a bag of sand inside, or some scrunched up newspaper up the top, just to bulk them out a bit. But wooden blocks are really good. But again, they're harder to find. So we have that on now, and the good thing about this glue is it's relatively tacky, so we don't have to worry about this falling off even though the glue is not dry, so we can continue working on our little building here. So something I like to add on the roof, like usually I'll build like a little square structure, but since this building is so small, what I'm gonna do is I collect sushi, when you go to sushi stores and they have those little fish, the little plastic fish that they have soy sauce in. Well, I collect the lids from those, and they can often be used as cool little I don't even know what they would be, but they're just decorations that you can put on the top of buildings. So if you have like little square blocks or something, I've seen like as like little measuring tools in like preschool, primary schools and stuff. They have like 1 centimeter cubed little wooden blocks, and those are really cool, as you can use those as details, so you can build like a little square, or just cut it out of something, or just put a layer of cardboard layered up, or foam board, and do all sorts of stuff to build little structures on the top of your buildings. But again, I'm keeping this one simple, so I'm just gonna use these 2 blocks, and I have one of the buildings I showed you earlier did actually have the exact same thing, so I'll just find that. Here we go. So you see this skyscraper? It's got these 2 little nodes here, which are the same as these little red tuna, not tuna, sushi packet stuff. So you can put these on at the end or now, so I'm just going to put these on now. And again, we just put glue on them. And we can, there's probably enough glue for both of them, so I'm gonna try and spread it out over the two. So now they both have a tiny bit of glue, and you can either put one on one end and the other on the other end, or two together. I find they look a little more industrial if there's like two together, but it really is up to you. I mean, you don't want it to go too crazy, because at the end of the day this is just a small building, and if you have too much on the top it'll look like a crazy factory, which could be cool if that's what you want to do. And I might build show you guys how to build like a factory industrial complex in the future if you like this series, so let me know if that's what you're interested in. But for now, that's what I'm going to do. The next step, which I would do, is I would put the bottom of the building. So by bottom, I mean the layer of shops at the bottom, because that's the first thing that's really going to dictate how many floors this building will have. So I'm just going to go over here and find the correct photo print of texture. So here's our shops. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a strip of it off. I'm not sure which one we'd like, but I'll just take like the first generic strip off the top of here, and we're gonna basically just wrap that around, and we'll see how much we need. So just doing this to see roughly. So yeah, we're gonna have a tiny bit extra, but we have plenty there to work with. So and there we go. So again, good scalpel knife, helps a lot. Now that we have this strip, we basically just see what way we want to wrap this around. I generally like spend some time and make sure that none of the stores are cut off awkwardly if possible, just to see which areas could be the part that actually wraps around. The tricky bit here is once you've got the rest of the wait for it to focus, but you can see there's the little stores wrapped around there, and the tricky bit here is to see where these two bits align. But you can sort of see that these two bits should align roughly around that area, and it's good to sort of, when you cut this excess off, for it to match up perfectly. So I just do it by eye, and then by just putting it like really close, and it looks like on camera like that black little store on this side here, where it ends, is pretty much the right place where this little store will begin. So we can cut off this orange store here and everything on this side. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then we will glue this strip down, and from there there's a couple of, we can do a lot of different things. So just line up your ruler, and I don't know if you can tell on camera, but in the here it's starting to become sunset outside, so hopefully our lighting will hold. So now that bit's cut off, I keep all of these scraps, so don't throw out anything, because all of these bits are really useful for fine detailing if you're doing lots of buildings. That didn't go in focus at all, did it? Sorry. But importantly, also, while you're wrapping this around the building, make sure you do it really tightly so you get these nice creases. That way, when you do try and cut that bit of material off at the end, it matches really nicely. And also make sure your shops are facing the right way up, because There is a top and a bottom if you look at the doors, though they're so small from a distance you won't really be able to tell it all, but I like to do, if I'm doing it I may as well do it right, you know? So from there what you can do is you can either put the glue on the sticker or on the building. I mean on the photo or on the building. I generally put it on the photo. It's a lot easier when it's a big one though, and this one's really small. So I don't know if you can see it there, but there I've got a little bit of glue, and I'm just gonna try to spread that out. Spread that out a little better. Making sure the glue doesn't dry in this time as well. And it's important to have just a little bit more glue coverage on the two ends that are probably going to try and peel off. And again, this glue is pretty good, so it's like the generic cement, but it does the job well. Another thing that I just remembered is if you want to improve the way this stuff sticks, because otherwise you might have to sit here holding it for a long time, is for stuff like this, or the bigger ones, you could put, especially around a block of wood, you could put a rubber band around this just to hold it while it dries. I've done that before and it helps a lot. I think I'm going to need a little more glue under here. So I'm sorry this process is going really slowly, but it's a very simple and very creative process, but it does take some time. So I'm actually rushing this a little bit, so I did manage to get these lined up, but one is a tiny bit taller than the other. So you see that's where those two ends line up, and now we have our storefronts. And this bit here, I'm just gonna dab a little bit more glue under and press that in, just with a thin matchstick. And then what we can do after this is we'll go through the various photos we have and decide what other texture we're going to use. We could, like I did on some of the other buildings, we could have build a thing that goes around this, and then we could put ads all over the front of that. And I think I might have to do that in the next episode, because it is starting to get dark, so that does take a little bit of time. But hopefully if you're building one of these, just from seeing the ones I made, that will help you just figure that out on your own, because it's simple, just takes time. So what we're going to do with this building is, instead of adding something that goes over that, is we'll just find a nice texture. And I might show you how to make like an advert that pokes out the side of this, which would be really cool. But just going through textures, what's a nice one? I even make these textures that you don't even have to cut out the bottom separately. You just wrap that around, and that one's really effective. We could make it all little balconies. That could be fun. So today we're making balconies. So now what you want to do is you want to decide how these balconies are going to wrap around it. And another important thing is, when you're putting the texture on the side of the building, in most cases I like to have it a little lower. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to cut a strip just all the way across at the correct height. So I've decided that this building will have, the bottom floor will be shops, and then it will have, let me just bring this up to the camera. So then it will end about here. So it will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories of balconies, and the 7th one will be this, and it'll kind of have like an 8th one, which will just be the top, just extend out from the top of it, and you'll see that in a sec once I cut the layer. So line this up just above that top window on that balcony, so our next layer will still have a bit of white under the bottom of the balcony when we use it on another building. And again, I could probably do this a little more accurately, but we're losing light, so we gotta get this done quickly, and I want to show you that you really can do this really simply and fast if you try. So we don't need that right now. And now you can see what I was talking about in a sec. So you have your layer of shops, and then you have balconies, and I've left the top there without a balcony, and I'll show you why in a bit. And it's one of those things that I really think is really effective. So you notice that these balconies aren't all exactly the same. Some are wider, some are thinner, and it's really up to you how you want to bend these around this building. So I'm just going to kind of try and find a pattern that looks about right. It's up to you whether you want to have the balcony bit as the bent bit or the pillar bit, and so it's really hard to get that happening the same on every corner without like customizing the building, but we can kind of get that happening here. So, you know, again, the basic idea of this is just to have the building covered the same way as the shop fronts, but this time in a bigger textured photo. And I highly recommend actually getting these glossy photo prints from somewhere like, goddamn, I forgot the name of it again. Officeworks. Somewhere like Officeworks, as opposed or printing out them at home in the gloss. So now you see that lines up there. So I did it a little differently than I said I would, but now we have all the corners have like a pillar, so we don't have a balcony being bent on any corner, so it looks a little more proper. Again, attention to detail, it helps. What would look cool here is if you did put the matchsticks just above the buildings, but I find the matchsticks are a bit trickier and they take a little longer to glue on. Also, you should use like PVA glue or something for those, although this glue will work too, but takes the PVA glue takes longer to dry, and this glue is a little messy on those. So, to glue this, so we're just gonna dab some glue. Okay, that might be a bit too much, might be just the right amount, we'll see. Be careful when you put a lot of glue on, because it might like pour out of the edges when you try and glue these things together. But sometimes having a little extra glue in the corners helps. And remember to spread it out as evenly as you can, especially around the bits where it could peel off. But again, this is a very small piece, so it's probably not going to have any problems holding on. And with the balconies, also remember that the window is at the top and the white bit is at the bottom. So the thicker white bits will be at the bottom. That's something very important to keep in mind with balconies. And then with this, we just have this really close. We stick it on nice and firmly, and hopefully these two will match up about right. And they do. And we see here, now we have a nicely covered building. And what you could do is that you could just paint the top and have it like this, but a step that I really like to do, and I think it adds a lot to a building, is I like to cap off the top with a layer of cardboard, just so it's a little taller than the top of it, to add like a lip around here, and it sticks out a little bit and adds a bit of texture. And after we do that, we'll get to painting it, but I think that glue's gonna hold, so you don't really have to press it all that much. But we were lucky enough to get it so that all the balconies line up, and there's not like a balcony that's been cut in half or looks weird. So turned out quite nice. But you've just got to work stuff out. Sometimes if something doesn't quite line up, you could just put like a strip of material down the side to look like some fancy pillar, or like where the elevator would go up and down. That could look good. If this stuff doesn't line up, or the bit's too small or something like that. And I'm gonna turn on a lamp because it's very dark here now, but it might not have the best lighting. So there's a building, and what we're gonna do now, and again, some people might find this bit a bit tedious or tricky, but I find that it's easy in theory, so you just gotta give it a go. So you could use a really soft cardboard like this, but it won't really have that texture, because this is a very thin paper-like cardboard. But what I'm going to use is I'm going to use that same cardboard that we used for this top bit, and I'm just going to see how wide a piece we need to go all the way around it. And you just do that by measuring all the edges against of this against this. So this is the one wide side, you flip it around, and then you get one of the thin sides, then you get the other wide side, and then the other thin side. And if you still have material, then that means this will be the right length. So what I'm gonna do is you can do this by eye or by measuring. And it looks like to just have about 1 millimeter higher coming off of the top of this cardboard at the top of the building when we wrap this around. We need to cut this so it is 8 millimeters tall. Actually, I'm not going to use this side because it kind of has dents in it. Okay, so this side would be better. So 8 mil. I'm not really sure how much that is in inches, but so we'll just use our pencil. So this time I'm actually measuring it out. You could do this in various ways again. I'll just make it like 8.5 mil, just to have that little bit extra in case. Because again, this doesn't need to be perfect, because we're just making a little demo building. And again, already I'm pretty happy with the way this is turning out. This is going to be a nice little building. And then you join these two together. And then instead of running a pencil down the ruler, we will now run our knife. And sometimes the thing with these bits of cardboard is they might split because they're made of layers of cardboard, and sometimes you might get a layer peeling off, and that might actually be a good thing in some cases, but you can also retain the thickness if you do a few little tricks. So this one's almost cut. You just probably didn't do this quite right. I think one side's a little thicker by 0.5 mil maybe than the other, but I'm not too bothered by that, to be honest. So there you go. Now we just do basically the same thing as we did with this, except with one of these, and a trick is to help it bend around this shape more, is we just mark off. So you have it here, and you set it up so it's just peeking out just the tiniest little bit past the top here. That might be a bit more than it needs to be, but just about a little bit less than the thickness of this entire bit of material. And then what we do is we get our pencil, we mark it off just past this bit here. And you can even kind of start to bend it, but again that starts to split. You can see it starts to split the cardboard here, so we don't want that. So I'm going to bend it over this way and just mark just past the building a little bit, and then flip it around again. And again, I'm doing this for the camera, so it's coming out really rough, and it looks like this cardboard may be too short. So hold on. I know, we'll see, but before I do that last bit, I'll just show you what I'm intending on doing, and we'll just do this bit by bit actually. Is with that little line, that little dot that you drew at the corners, you can score it, not cut completely through, but just slightly cut through a couple of layers of this cardboard with a knife. You can even do like multiple cuts to create like a, like you can just do where is it? There is it. You can just do one line, or you can do like two next to each other just to have even more of a curve to them, and that'll help that bend. That'll help it. So I'm always looking to the side here. It's just where I got my monitor to see whether this is in focus, but it'll help it bend at the appropriate point without the cardboard falling apart. So again, you don't want to cut through this, but you just want to cut through a couple of layers, and then that will help it bend. And there we go. Looking good. Looking good. And you also have to be mindful, some of these blocks, they aren't always the same size. One side might be a little thinner, and they might not be exactly square. So this might not work out every time. And it does actually look like this little segment's too short. So I'll just cut it off here, and I'll just cut another one, because I can do that. You could just bend it off and maybe put in an antenna or something here. But I think for my project here, this will be the easiest. So I just put in a little line with the knife where I should cut it off. And there we go. And this bit is ready to glue on. I'm gonna cut a separate little rectangle just for this side. It's a little bit of a hassle, but it's worth it, you know. Actually, before I do that, I want this bit to be white, so when it wraps around here, it will match with the color of the rest of the building. So, and it's a little tricky to paint under there later on. So I'm just gonna get a tiny piece of white, tiny bit of white paint. Actually, in retrospective, I should have used white cardboard for this, but that was a bit stupid of me, so sorry. So I'm just chucking a bit of paint on there, doing this very unprofessionally actually. Alright, so I painted this thing white, very roughly I might say. I could have done a much better job, and I also cut out, while I was at it, I also cut out a little square to be the last wall of this little lip that runs around the building. But before we're gonna glue that on, obviously this is still drying, I'm just gonna mix up some gray paint. So get your generic container or whatever you're using to mix your paint. You can mix any color you like, really. You could have it, leave it that sandy color, but I'm going to be painting those red things too. So I'm just using generic acrylic, water-based acrylic paint. So you don't need much black, even though I wanted a fairly dark gray. Just mixing the paint, probably made too much anyway. And you can just mix in other colors if you want a different tints, and I really recommend that if you're making lots of buildings. Not all of them have to have a dark gray top. You can have them have a light gray top. You can have them have sandy colored top, like this one already is with that cardboard, or all sorts of colors. And I've decided to do this before I what's it called? Before I glue on that lip, because this way we're going to get it looking much cleaner on the inside of this. And I believe that's exactly what I did for my other buildings. And just for the moment, I'm going to color these little red caps the same color as the top of the building. You could always change these, or you're likely to have completely different ornaments on the top of your buildings. Just really look at photos of the tops of buildings and see what kind of stuff they have up there. And obviously try and make it in scale with the rest of your building. Like if this was, like, I don't even have any idea what these things would be. Maybe they'd be like water tanks or something. Because these are one of the stranger things you'd see on a small building like this, I think. But again, that might just add character. So that's about good for this thing, and now I'm just going to wait for that to dry, and then we're going to wrap it around the top. Alright guys, so this is all painted, and these are about dry, so it's time to put all these pieces together. So just gonna, same as before, we just get our glue, and we put this strip of it all across the back here. Again, you kind of learn about what's too much and what's too little just by doing this, so it's really hard to say. There's a little bit of glue, and same goes for this little piece, but we'll put that on last. So one thing I did want to say was now, this video's, I'm not sure how long it's gone, but it probably has gone into a bit of a long video. But I wanted you guys to bear in mind that this, to create I don't want that to like dissuade you from trying this out, because to create a little building like the one we have here, you kind of get in the groove of it, and you're able to make these a lot quicker when you're doing more of them, because I haven't made one of these in a long time actually. I made the ones I did that I showed you months and months ago, so I've not touched any craft for a while. But you're also able to do this a lot faster if you're not filming, and like if you're doing lots of them at once, because then you kind of get in the groove of doing a whole bunch of bits at once and then putting them all together. And so there we go. This has that side on it now, and I'm just going to put that one this bit on here. And again, if you depending on how you want the top of this building to look, you can do different styles. You could have just had it blank and painted, or put a thin one on or a thick one on. I'm kind of getting the vibe that this thick one might be a bit too thick, but it probably also would have looked better if I'd have used white cardboard, which I did have, but for some reason I used black because, not black, brown, because I wasn't thinking. So, yeah, just be a little mindful of what you're doing more so than I am. So, that's pretty much it for this building. I'm just gonna give you a little close-up of it. I think I got a little paint splodge on it, but it's okay. So, not the greatest building I've made, but actually, while we're at it, I will show you guys how to put advertising on it a slightly different way. One way we can put advertising on this thing, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways. And bear in mind, this building is just to show you building techniques more than how to make this specific little building. So hopefully through watching this video, it will give you some ideas about lots of different ways you can make different buildings using the same techniques. So I'm just gonna see if I have any more pages of ads, because the ones that I have here aren't quite the best what I'm looking for, because you can see I've used up a lot of these, and that means I've used up a lot of the good ones. And I remember what happened. Just give me a second. I had them pre-cut, so I have a whole bunch of these ones pre-cut and ready. So guys, I'm terribly sorry. I can't exactly find where I had those pre-cut advertising bits, because they're all the best ones. And I have, back when I was making these things, I had so many of like these sort of boxes full of bits that I've had to put a lot of them into some kind of, store them long term, and somewhere amongst them, somewhere there are those bits. And I have a lot of other little bits that you can use, like I have all these matchsticks here. I have these sort of trees that you can buy really cheap from China on eBay, if that's what you're after. And I've got this stuff which I will show you how to make in a future episode. So this is clump foliage, and it's actually really easy to make yourself, and it looks really convincing. So I'll show you guys how to make that in another episode. But for now, we're going to use the ads, the bits that I have left. You see these various banners? What I did was, when I was photoshopping all these together and, like, you know, little things like that, is I made ones like these that were on the rest of this page, and you'll see it if you open up the photo in Facebook and you save it and print it out for yourself. But there were ones like these that were like double, so there was the exact same thing next to, like, rows of them, so you could cut out two at once, and then you have, you know, one picture and then another picture. And what you can do is you could fold them so you have the picture on either side, and then you can put it like sticking out of a building, like a little very long billboard that goes this way. So that's what I was gonna show you how to do, but I can't find any really decent ones. I guess we can just cut out ones no, completely different on either side, and hopefully it'll look okay. So I'm just gonna, just for simplicity's sake, it won't look as good as the ones that I was talking about, but I'll just cut out this and like whatever that is next to it. It's kind of a mishmash of different ones, but if we do this right, it might look okay. So I'm gonna cut out a little bit here. Just use the knife. There we go. So we have this. Just picture that, whoops. Just picture that down the middle is two of the same picture, just split differently. It doesn't have to be the same, actually, come to think of it, but two separate billboards or advertisements or signs. Then I'm just using a a little Stanley knife to, not Stanley knife, scalpel knife to bend those two. And now that they're nicely bent, we could, there's a couple ways we could do this. I used pins before to glue it on, but I'm just thinking what would work best with this building here, because ideally it would like kind of stick out like that or something somewhere along it. I'm just kind of making this up as I go along, to be honest. So I'm just gonna, just a little, whoops, just a little square offcut of cardboard. I'm gonna see how I can shape this so that it'll be a good little shape that will hold that piece together and hold it to the building. Now, of course, you can just cut out these ads and just glue them straight onto a flat surface of a building. I usually don't do it over the windows. I try and do it like around the lip, or like I said, on a little bit that sticks out at the front above the shops. I find that looks the best, but you can just stick it on the windows if you like that look too. So there we go, we have a little C shape of cardboard. And what I'm going to do is the two bits that are sticking out, I'm going to cut into them slightly and peel off the layers of cardboard until they're really thin. Probably not even the whole bit, just a little bit of what's sticking out. So hopefully that will focus up and you can kind of see what I did there. So you can kind of see it's like this C shape. I'm gonna make the back of this a little thinner, but you've got these two little fin bits coming out, and those bits are gonna fit in between. You're gonna have this ad, and oh man, the focus is so bad. I'm so sorry. There we go. You're gonna have this ad, and it's kind of gonna clip on to the fin bits of this C shape. So you're gonna press it down here and glue the back of this down, and you're gonna glue the back of this this bit. I'm gonna make it thinner though, but you're gonna glue the back of that to the building if you're gonna be copying what I'm doing. But you could do this lots of ways, but this is just one example. Like you could use a what's it called, a staple, and just stick it in the building if it's made of cardboard. If the wood, it might be a little harder, and just have the ad stuck to that. That's a really good method. Or pins, like I said. Or really whatever you think of that works well for you, just go with that. So this cardboard's kind of starting to fall apart, but I'll try and glue it back together while I'm doing this. So I'm just putting a strip of glue down the back. I probably should have done that last, but it's kind of also there to hold this whole thing back together. And then I'm going to put a bit of glue on the white side of this advertising, making sure it's like at the edges here and here, so when you close this up it will press on the thin part of that little C we made and lock it all in place. So our little C will go there, and then we sandwich it in with this advertising. And this is the first time I've tried using this method, so hopefully it'll look good. But like I said, it's all about your creativity and coming up with your own ideas and looking at all these little decorations that you can add to add character to your buildings. So I put a messy bit of glue on this. I could also probably paint this bit of cardboard, but I won't be bothered because, again, this is just to show you guys as an example. Because at the moment I have more than enough buildings, so I don't really need to make any for my own displays in particular. And then, so I got a bead of glue down the back of this. This is what it looks like. Sometimes I just have to block out the background for it to focus on what's in front of the camera. And I couldn't get it in focus for you guys, unfortunately, but you'll see it mounted to the building later on. So we have our piece here and our building, and you can just play around with where to put it really. So I think I might just put it in the middle of the wide area here. And I didn't make that C shape perfectly straight, so it looks a little strange, but it's actually holding on really well. So if the camera would focus, and you can see it there. So you got that bit of cardboard that's holding that ad, and it's like this it's holding it sort of above street view, so when a car drives past it sees this big sign here. And you could put a whole bunch of these on a building, and really you just have to look to actual buildings for inspiration and all that sort of stuff. But now we can give you guys a really good look at the building that we've put together in this episode. So it's got that top, the lip around the top of the building, the little ornaments on the to decorate the roof, and advertising, as well as all the balconies and the storefronts. So now what you can do is you can use all, like, I think this building could have been done a lot better, but the techniques used in it are basically is what this video is about. So you can use the same techniques that I used to make this building to make a whole bunch of all the buildings that I showed you, really. And we can just kind of close off this video by, I'll just show you what this building would look like in amongst a bunch of other buildings, really. So there we go. You can put your Godzilla back here. I'll just get rid of some of the stuff. And then, you know, check in some extra buildings somewhere. I'll change the angle for you guys in a second. And yeah, just I hope that this building has given you this building tutorial and just this video in general has given you a whole bunch of ideas, and I'd really love to see what you guys come up with. So definitely join up with the that group that I was telling you about, the custom effect parts and dioramas group, because that's a very good group, and we always love to see what you guys come up with. So there it is. So again, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it and got some good info from it, and I'd really love to hear what you'd like to see further in the series. So yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of this stuff specifically aimed at kaiju displays. So let me know what you guys have thought of, if you've got any tips or tricks, and yeah, just if you have links to photos of what you create, I'd love to see it, or do a YouTube video or whatever. And yeah, so with that, over and out, people. It's been a great little video. It's been great doing this video for you guys finally, because I've been intending to do it for a very long time. So yeah, without further ado, may all your vinyl be irradiated vinyl. Over and out.